Hey guys, hCG Chica. I wanted to share with you guys a little pre-hCG diet thing that I utilized for my last 3 rounds that I feel were of great help to me, and I'll talk about why. Now, this is totally optional. This is not part of the original protocol at all, so you definitely don't have to do it. However, it's not super complicated, and it can really make the start of the diet much easier for you, or at least it did for me. So it's not like, a 2-month cleanse where you have to buy a bunch of special fibers and herbs or anything like that. Probably doing something like that would be helpful, but I kind of feel like that's like too much to add on to a protocol that's already, fairly complex as it is. So what I did for my last 3 rounds of hCG was I just ate low carb for a period of about a week to 10 days before I started the diet. So that's it. Just ate low carb, and by that I mean I took out all sugars and starches, and I'll detail that out in a minute for you guys. But I also made sure to add in a lot of higher fat foods. So that's all I did, again, for about a week to 10 days before loading and before, getting on VLCD. I would just eat low carb for 7 to 10 days. Now this may be like, totally unnecessary for some of you guys out there, and obviously, use caution and check with your doctor and all that stuff before you do anything. But for me, doing this before my last 3 rounds really made those rounds go much smoother for me. So I'd like to explain why I chose to do that, what the benefits were for me. So I have what I call a sugar addiction. I really and truly. And it's easier for me to talk about now because 1, I have it under control, and 2, once I actually started talking about it on my videos, I had a lot of people start emailing me who basically resonated with my story and basically told me that they were in the same boat. So it's easier for me to talk about that now. Now, when I first started the hCG diet protocol, obviously I had no experience whatsoever, and so I just started the protocol the way I had read to do it. What happened is I experienced some pretty severe carb/sugar withdrawal type symptoms that were pretty rough. And I'm talking about like being curled up in my bed, craving chocolate and feeling like I was going to give up on the diet, those types of feelings. And others have reported to me similar things where they just felt like really crappy flu-like symptoms, just like a cleansing detox type symptoms during like the first week of the diet. Now, I'm not saying that experience is completely avoidable on hCG. I think it partially depends on, how long you've been eating poorly prior to starting the diet, But my experience has been, since I can compare, that doing this little pre-hCG diet thing, and remember, it's only for like a week to 10 days, so it's not like a really long time, but doing that made those symptoms a lot less acute. In fact, to be honest, once I was getting pretty healthy because I had done a few rounds of hCG and I was eating a healthy lifestyle, by the time my 4th and 5th round came around, I really didn't even have those types of detox symptoms. And again, I do think that doing my little low carb thing prior to that really helped with that. And I want to explain to you guys now why it is that helps. So basically what happens is when you switch from a diet that's higher in carbs, which if you're eating a typical American diet and you're overweight, you probably have been eating that way with a higher level of carbs, which there's nothing wrong with carbs in themselves. But you may have had a higher carb diet, and now what's going to be happening is you're switching over to a much lower carb diet. And when that happens, there's often what's called like a carb flu withdrawal symptoms where your body is having to transition. It's used to having carbs as a fuel source and that's what it's been operating well on, and then all of a sudden those carbs aren't there, and so now your body is having to transition over to something else, and that transition is what's hard. I was kind of thinking about like a train that's like going fast one way and then all of a sudden it has to stop and then like start going the other way. And that there's a tremendous amount of like energy and power that has to go into that transition until it's up to speed again. And that's often what happens when you switch over to a low carb diet. So my point here is that, you know, if you wait until you start the hCG diet for that to take place, which you can. I mean, I did that my first couple rounds. Plenty of other people do that. I just found that the symptoms are pretty tough to deal with because there aren't any things that you can compensate with to make it easier. However, if you go through the switching from higher carb to lower carb before starting the diet, there's some things that you're able to do to compensate for that that make the symptoms not as severe. One of those things is just that you have more calories to eat. And another one of those things is I really do put a focus on higher fat foods. When I was originally actually researching how to, you know, get over carb withdrawal symptoms as quickly as possible, back in the day when I was going to try this out, that was basically what I came across was that eating a higher fat diet basically helped you get over those symptoms faster and they didn't feel as strong or as acute. So if you do the pre-hCG diet thing, see, you're able to do that. You're able to not only take the carbs out, but you're also able to up your fats temporarily, and you're also, you know, able to eat a reasonable amount of food. And so basically what I found was that it made those withdrawal symptoms, like I said, I'm kind of repeating myself, but a lot less severe, and in some cases I hardly even experienced any at all. So that's one of the biggest reasons that I do that. Now, outside of just getting rid of like more physical type symptoms from taking carbs out of your diet, there's also like a mental and emotional aspect to it. If you are a person like me who is rather addicted to carbs and sugar before I started the diet, there is a very strong emotional withdrawal as well. And again, I found the same thing, that by doing the pre-hCG diet, it really got rid of those cravings. Sometimes we forget about how strong basically a force cravings can be. And so sometimes, you know, you're planning for the diet and you're looking at all the logical stuff like all on paper, like, okay, these are the foods I'm going to eat, this is how many calories I'm going to eat, but you're not like totally in reality yet because you're not on the diet yet. And then once you are, then you're in reality and it's like, whoa, this is really hard and I really wish I could have, you know, some cake or some chips and dip or whatever, you know. And again, regardless, you may end up experiencing that anyway, but I really do think that in general, like, I'm so glad that I did this little low carb thing before I started the diet for my last 3 rounds, because it was so much more manageable, like so much easier. And you know, that's important because you want to have success on this diet. And a lot of people either cheat or give up because they don't realize just how difficult it is. And that's part of what my blog is all about, is to really prepare you guys to not to like make you bummed out or make you think you can't do it, but just to, you know, present the real side of it, that it is difficult, and not that you can't be successful, but just that because it's difficult, you do need to take steps to prepare yourself, just in logical ways, preparing yourself mentally and emotionally. And when you do that and you take these logical steps, you know, like if you think, yeah, I am a person who eats a lot of carbs every day or a lot of sugar, you might think to yourself like, this might be a good way to start myself off on the right foot, because it is so much easier to get through this protocol if you're not having like that constant hankering for sugary or sweet or carby type stuff. So for 7 to 10 days before you do the loading phase and then, you know, get on the 500 calorie diet, basically you just, 1, eat low carb and high fat. So you need to do both, don't just do one. 2, no starches and no sugars. And for me, that includes even fruits, which I'll give you some details on in a second. And 3, don't worry about calorie intake. At least that's how I did it. I didn't worry about that. Usually when you eat that low carb, there's usually no concern with any weight gain or anything like that. In fact, oftentimes I'll lose a couple pounds, although it's probably just water. So now I want to just share with you guys basically examples of foods to eat and foods to avoid on the little pre-hCG diet if you decide to do it. So foods to eat, high-fat meats like bacon, pork chops sauteed in butter, lamb chops, chicken thighs with skin, or if I have chicken breast, I'll saute it in butter. For vegetables, you want to pick, lower carb varieties, and I'll douse them with olive oil or butter. I'll do things like green beans, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, avocado, squash, snap peas, snow peas, mushrooms, fennel, bell pepper. So those are all types of things. And remember, if you're not a big vegetable eater, I never used to be, but honestly, just steaming vegetables and putting butter and salt on them, I love that, and I do that with almost everything, and I think it tastes great. The other thing you can do is just saute them for a few minutes with butter or olive oil and add some salt. So it doesn't have to be complicated. Then as far as dairy goes, I used things like eggs, cheese, heavy whipping cream, sour cream, butter. So those are things I included. Now sometimes dairy can be high in carbs, so like you don't want to be drinking gallons of milk because actually there's quite a bit of like lactose. So the sugar, content actually does add up if you're doing that. But as far as like harder cheeses go, the fat part of dairy, like the whipping cream, there's almost no carbs in that, so you don't have to worry about that. And then for sweeteners, you might use stevia, erythritol, xylitol as needed. This is a transition. I do still use stevia, but I don't really use the other sweeteners anymore because I've just kind of turned more to whole foods. But I recognize that sometimes you need something during the in-between period when you're, going from, you can't usually go from like chocolate cake straight to kale. Just maybe you can, but I didn't work that way for me. I moved there gradually with some steps in between. So sometimes the sweeteners like the erythritol and xylitol can be useful. And then baked good ingredients as alternatives like flaxseed meal, almond meal, coconut flour. And with the almond meal, you want to use it in moderation because nuts actually do have more carbs than you'd realize. So, you can have some, but just, be cautious with it. Don't eat like, a huge batch of cookies made from almond flour. Just, do it in moderation. Because remember, if you decide to do this, you're doing this as you're adding it onto the protocol as something that you're viewing as a way to achieve your goal. Because this is a life change and it's not going to happen overnight, and this is something that you might be able to use as a tool and take it seriously to help you get there more effectively, especially if you've tried hCG in the past but you couldn't do it right or you couldn't keep it off. This might be something that can help you this time. Now, as far as foods to avoid, for me when I did it, that was all fruit. I do have in here, if you're desperate, berries are a good lower carb fruit. So like some strawberries or blueberries or blackberries, those are lower carb. So you could probably get away with having a little bit of that. I avoided higher carb vegetables like potatoes, yams, sweet potatoes, cooked carrots, peas, all grains, obviously wheat, oats, barley, even sprouted grains have plenty of carbs. Rice, corn, just all that stuff. Beans, so things like hummus, baked beans, lentils, split peas, refried beans, black beans. So those would all be things you'd avoid just during this period here. And nuts, again, these are higher carb than you realize. So like I used to love cashews and I would eat like tons of them, and the carbs can add up when you do that. So if you use them sparingly, it's probably fine, but just sparing. And then obviously no forms of sugar, white sugar, maple syrup, honey. I'm all for the paleo style of eating, and I think it totally has its place, because that allows the use of things like honey, I believe. But in this case, we're actually just trying to get away from all sugars and carbs. Because we're trying to do that transition before we get on the diet so that we don't experience those withdrawals and cravings and crappy feelings. So lastly, remember, this is not some instruction from a medical facility or from some highly researched experiment. This is just something that I did a little research on my own after having a failed round 2. and I decided to try this out, and it worked so well for me that I did it for my last 3 rounds of the diet, and it worked excellently. So I just thought I'd share it with you guys in case it's something that you want to add on to the protocol. But again, my little pre-hCG diet, it's my own little hCG Chica thing. It's not part of the original protocol. You definitely don't have to do it. But if you've had trouble, you might find it helpful. So anyway, that's it. I hope you guys found that helpful. You can find me on Facebook, hCG Chica, Instagram, hCG Chica. Basically, whatever social media, I'm not on them all, but if you want to see if I'm on there, you can just search hCG Chica, because there really aren't any other hCG Chicas out there that I know of. So, all right, you guys, take care. Bye.